Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Friday 365. Today's guest is Jesse, a mental performance and business coach helping entrepreneurs stay focused, clear, and fulfilled. I saw some of his content on Instagram and I had to bring him on the show. Let's unpack the mindset, systems, and habits behind building a life and business with clarity. I'm excited to have you on the show, Jesse.
Amazing, Matt. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation here. That's a great intro.
And let's have some fun. I've got a lot of great questions lined up. And for the listeners who may not be familiar with your line of work yet, can you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so you pretty much summed it up. I'm Jesse. I'm a mental performance coach. I'm working mostly with entrepreneurs and business owners, helping them to scale their businesses through clarity and having the proper personal systems and frameworks mentally and physically to perform at that highest level. So my background stemming from performance and organizational psychology, working with a lot of basketball players and athletes brought me into this world, and it's been a really great transition over the past few years, and I love what I do.
And Jesse, I want to start off. How can you tell if they're lacking clarity?
So that's a really great question, and there's a few different ways to answer it. Obviously, within conversations with them, when you try to understand what their goals are, but even beyond the goals, what their identity is and how they and what language they use to describe who they are. And if I were to put it this way, one of the things that I see is what I call the alignment gap, which is when someone describes their goals in one way, and then they start to speak of themselves and their identity in another way. And there's a discrepancy between those two. And there's not actually alignment between the goals that they want to and believe they can achieve and the identity that they embody in the present tense. And so that's a clear indication of a lack of clarity is, well, why is your goal this, but you're not embodying the identity of the person that's capable of achieving that goal? That means either there's some lack of self-confidence, lack of self-trust, lack of systems and frameworks to operate at a higher level to be able to achieve those goals, or the goals are misaligned. They don't understand why they set those goals. Maybe they saw someone on the internet that's achieving X revenue and they thought, oh, well, that's the number I want to get to. And it's not founded or grounded in something that actually means something to them. The common saying is, what's your why? And that's a way to really understand if someone's clear or not on their vision. So that alignment gap is a clear indication of a lack of clarity.
Yeah, I always like to think about how will you know if you never take the jump into the water if you'll sink or swim?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You'll never know. The only way to succeed is through failing quick enough, as often enough as possible, to have the feedback to implement the improvements that it takes to elevate.
Now, Jesse, why do you think most people feel distracted today?
Well, the clear answer is it's timely that you mentioned that we're surrounded by stimulus external to ourselves, whether that's comparing ourselves to others on social media or just consuming educational or informational entertainment content. No matter what it is, there's so much stimulus, and especially for younger generations that basically are born into these dopamine-driven feedback loops of TikTok and Instagram and craving immediate feedback and reward, it hijacks our actual brain to crave constant stimulus, whether it's through music or fidgeting or any of these other symptoms that we identify as being ADHD or anything of that nature. Yeah, our brains are just being hijacked by our surroundings, and we don't actually take enough of the time within ourselves and our own thoughts to basically deprive ourselves of the dopamine or stimulus that we constantly are engaging with, and therefore we become almost numb to the effects of it, or at least we see diminished effects of it, which is how a dopamine feedback loop works, which is the novelty starts to wear off, and so we need a higher, more intense dose of dopamine or stimulus or whatever it is for different people, whether it's, like I said, social media, whether it's sweet processed foods, whether it's pornography, or like any of those other things that contribute to these feedback loops. We crave them in more intense doses, and then that cycle repeats itself. So that's why we're always distracted, is because that's what we're surrounded by, and we're constantly going to crave those distractions.
No, yeah, Jesse, I've heard a lot of people say that it's harder for kids to focus now more than ever. I'd love to hear
100%.
your take. How do you think growing up with a screen is affecting kids today, like iPad kids?
Yeah, basically what I just said is a clear indicator. When someone's born into, I don't want to get too out there with certain comparisons, but if someone's born into an environment where they're constantly surrounded by a screen, something that's able to produce a series of colors and sounds and gamified experiences and things like that that are literally wired for us to crave and come back to, whether it's the games or however they make the cartoons these days, I don't even know. But they forces us to crave those things. And when you're exposed to that so early and often, again, the dose wears off. And in order to achieve the same efficacy and the same response, you need a bigger, more intense dose. And as that cycle repeats, you go from being the iPad kid to being, maybe a teenager that's not capable of carrying a conversation or sitting still in a class or any of those things. As far as sitting still in a class goes, I mean, there are some flaws within the current education system that just doesn't match up with the psychology and now I guess the actual neuroscience of how kids are being raised or are developing because of the attention deficits that we're seeing that are caused by a lot of the electronics, the artificial processed foods, anything else like that. So we just have too much access to so much stimulus and cravings, things that could be considered cravings. And that's why ADHD is rising and it's now like almost a popular tokenized term.
Yeah, there's so many distractions in the day and age that we live in. I mean, what's your favorite system to cut out the noise?
I mentioned it was a timely question that you asked. Oh, this past Wednesday, I went on a 12-hour walk, and it was a walk of complete silence and solitude. No phone, no screens, no music, no podcast, no speaking, nothing other than me, my thoughts, walking. I walked about 27 miles or so to and from Brickell in Miami to Bal Harbor, way north Miami. That in itself is, of course, an exercise in deprivation and solitude and being able to sit with your thoughts and unravel either some deeper truths or deeper things that have been sitting within my mind specifically that I wanted to bring to the surface, but also as a way to detox. People do juice cleanses and all these other certain fads. Like, what about a dopamine detox and actually committing yourself to separating from dopamine and different stimulus that we're so used to being in and controlled by? That was a framework that really worked for me on a more microscopic level. Understanding the way the brain works. I think your question was, what's a good framework to minimize the effects of this, which is early in the morning. Our brains are most susceptible to information, good and bad. And that's because of the brain waves that we experience in the morning. When we're in a deep sleep, that's when we're in our delta and theta wave zone, which are the frequencies of the brain waves measured by hertz. And so in the delta and theta wave, that's when we're in the deep sleep. That's when you're in your REM cycles where your brain is susceptible to dreams and all these other information. And when we wake up and we're kind of coming out of that, when we're first waking up early in the morning, if you ever felt like your mind's just racing, all these things I got to do today, this, that, and the other thing, most people short circuit that system by grabbing their phone. And when you're waking up, it's a alpha and theta brainwave, which is what you're experiencing when you're waking up. That's when you're most susceptible to be able to unpack what are your priorities for the day, what are some things you got to work on, what are you gotten to do the past day or two, like things that our brains are capable of understanding and resolving. And so when we build a tendency of grabbing our phones and hijacking that system, we're basically short-circuiting our brains and flipping them into potentially a gamma wave state or things like that, which aren't conducive to deep work, focus, flow, a lot of those other things. And so that microscopic system is, don't touch your phone for the first hour after you wake up. Spend that time in solitude thinking through what are your priorities for the day, what are my non-negotiables, and write the list every single day. Keep your 3 to 5 non-negotiables that remain constant throughout every single day. But in the beginning of each day, write out the list of, here are the top 3 wildly most important things that I need to do today. If I do nothing else, but I get these 3 done, this will be a successful day. Because once you lose sight of that, then you feel like you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. You're not doing enough is something I hear from a lot of my clients. Oh, I'm not doing enough, I'm not getting enough done. Well, no one else has ever defined what doing enough is other than ourselves. When have you ever heard those words, other than in a measurable job where you work 9 to 5 and you have a clear list of tasks that are given to you externally and you get to react and do them? Well, working with a lot of entrepreneurs, you don't have that structure, that framework to be given everything that you have to do and just react and do it. We have to be proactive in understanding what are the highest leverage, highest impact tasks that we can spend our time on in order to move the business forward, move our lives forward, serve the people around us, our family, everything like that. So being proactive, I think, is the best framework that I could suggest to anyone. Just give yourself that space and that solitude to proactively ascribe each of your tasks each day.
Yeah, having that target and writing off the three things that you wrote down and getting one done at a time is really powerful. And taking action, that is a big mindset shift a lot of people have to take. For one, walked a full marathon with zero music, zero phone, and zero technology. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Well, the biggest takeaway, honestly, I, I I still don't even know if I could fathom running a marathon, but that's just because of some aches and pains that I deal with physically that are limiting for me. Honestly, the takeaway is every single person can do it and should be able to do it, and it shouldn't be seen as this daunting thing. For me, I was excited and nervous. I know I could do it, but it wasn't even meant to be a feat of physical endurance. It was more so a mental endurance or test. And so honestly, I found it pretty refreshing to be able to completely disconnect and understand that I have no access to screens, phones, anything like that, and that I completely could be alone with my thoughts. And it was honestly pretty peaceful. So I know that experience might not be the same for many other people, but that had been a theme that I've already been embodying previous to that. Instead of driving to my gym about a mile away, I started just walking every day to and from. So that was only like a solid hour that I would do that. And usually I don't lift with music anyway. But yeah, so that's something that I'm a bit more accustomed to. But yeah, it was a really great experience. Anyone can do it. Everyone should do it. If it's not 12 hours, make it 6 hours, something. Start small and work your way up. But I think it's important.
Yeah, when walking a marathon, basically, that's really incredible how you took action. But what was the first thing that hit your mind the moment you stepped off and totally unplugged?
Anyone that knows the Miami area, it can be hit or miss, but I started the walk at 2 a.m. So I decided, I'll get up early, I'll avoid the Miami sun and humidity as best I could and try to get over to the beach by sunrise. So my first initial thoughts were, all right, let me make sure I don't get rolled up on by anyone and make it to the beach safely. And so my head was on a swivel for the first few hours. So if I were to do it, I wasn't too worried in all reality, but I had to just at least be conscious. That was that was where my mind was early on. And then the other thing I would do differently as well is instead of setting a destination, my mind was a little focused on, okay, I want to get to Bal Harbor. I want to get to this end point, and that kind of drew my mind out of being present a bit. So I would probably do that differently next time. But otherwise, it was just like, wow, I'm doing this for me. I'm going to trust myself to unravel the thoughts that are in my mind and see where that gets me. And so I would try to go into it with very minimal expectations other than solitude.
Jesse, what did you see in your own city, Miami, that you never noticed before? Taking this mile.
Yeah, so it's a good question too. Most of the walk was along the beach. There's a long walk basically from Miami Beach that goes all the way up to the end of where the inlet is. I really don't know if I have a clear answer for that because there's so much that I've become accustomed to. I don't know if I have a clear answer. Being able to see the transition from parts of the neighborhood and all the development going on. I love real estate, and so that's one thing that drew my attention is just observing a lot of the new development, things like. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer. I think I'm coming up blank here.
Well, did you end up being in the flow state at all when walking?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. When you talk about the flow state, that's definitely an interesting concept as it relates to the walk. I would say, honestly, one thing that brought me into that state was, this might sound weird, but I started to get two pretty bad blisters on both my feet in the same spot, on like my middle toe, from rubbing up against my big toe, for just to paint the clear picture. Part of the flow state requires a challenge. And had it not been for some slight pain or feedback to say that what I was doing was challenging, I might have just kind of been walking and got lost in the walk, but there wouldn't have been anything too challenging about it. I just walked. Although walking can sometimes be even more strenuous than running in different ways. But with that a slight level of pain paired with the idea of having a clear goal of, okay, I got to get to this location. That kind of allowed me to immerse myself into a state where I was so focused on, again, it's funny to compare it this way because it's just walking. But I was so immersed that I started to feel my mind start to release, and I would notice there's little block markers as you walk up the beach with that mark what street it is, and basically Miami Beach, it starts at First Street, and when you get to Bal Harbor, you're at 90 something street. So it's 90. 100 blocks or whatever it is. And there were times where I realized, like, I just previously had noticed 65, and then, my next recollection is like 80 something, and just the totally 20 blocks in between just disappeared. And I wish I did a better job at journaling, but because I was on the move, I didn't. And so I can't, at this point, recall what my thoughts would have been at that time. And that's another thing I would do differently, is take time to actually stop and journal. But yeah, there was absolutely some experiences there where I just felt fully immersed. All time was lost. I would be 20 blocks further than I was before. And in the snap of a finger, it felt like, yeah, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, can I make a suggestion? Maybe get one of those recorders that you can buy on Amazon.
Yeah.
Bluetooth to your phone, and you just press record, and then you can just
Yeah.
put down your thoughts.
Yeah,
it's
that
really
is a
cool
good
how you did a whole marathon.
Yeah.
You walked a whole 26 miles. I mean, what was the biggest takeaway? What's one of the biggest things you learned about yourself through those 26 miles?
Honestly, just that I am able to sit with myself and I don't need external inputs to figure out what my answers need to be or what I should be doing next or all these other things. That I should have the self-trust and self-confidence to look inward for answers versus reverting or resorting to external inputs, the opinions of others, or ChatGPT is a big one as well that I just get sucked in. And every time I have an idea, boom, there goes an hour into ChatGPT, just basically building up whatever I do in there. Yeah, the recorder is a good idea. The only thing was I had to be silent, so I wasn't able to talk. Otherwise, I thought about buying the Claude AI tool, but yeah, it's just handwriting everything because I wasn't speaking. But that is a good idea.
Do you have any advice for anyone that wants to do the same thing as you, walk around Miami or just walk around their own?
Yeah.
Just because like I have a goal about running a marathon, but like.
Amazing.
Hearing that story from you actually is really inspiring. Maybe I'll walk it instead of actually running it, because 26 miles is a toll on your body.
Yeah, for sure. So what I would say first off, again, because most people might hear it and it'll be daunting, and a goal that it doesn't feel achievable is not a goal that most people are going to follow through on. And so I would say, in addition to kind of answering your question, what I would say is, if you're someone that's ambitious and you feel like you have really big goals, but something inside of you tells yourself that goal is not achievable, A, figure out the source to that self-doubt, but B, take that bigger goal and break it down into smaller achievable goals. Because without stacking the wins of those smaller important goals, you don't get any feedback to keep you motivated. And yes, I say the word motivated, even though everyone wants to say discipline over motivation, but that's because motivation is important. And if you don't repeat small wins over and over to stack that confidence, which then builds into motivation, it's going to be very hard to sustain follow through in whatever it is that you're doing. So motivation will always beat discipline, which might be contrary to what you hear other people think, but you have to build it intentionally. As it relates to this walk, what I would say to anyone doing it is, whether it's 12 hours, 6 hours, 2 hours, doesn't matter. I would say put the phone on airplane mode, keep it in their backpack for safety, and just set a timer and walk. Don't have a destination in mind. Don't have anything in mind. Maybe bring a pen and a journal or something. But other than that, just walk and give yourself the freedom and the permission to disconnect and not need to respond to anyone. Tell everyone beforehand, hey, I'm doing this, just so you know. Check in with me in about X amount of hours to make sure I made it out alive. But yeah, beyond that, just go and do something and give yourself the permission to disconnect and do the hard work, which is sitting with your thoughts long enough. Because for a lot of people, that's a scary thought, especially, today with the comparison game and social media. It leads to a lot of self-doubt, and we see symptoms of depression are on the rise, and anxiety and all these other things. So that's the biggest thing I would say, is give yourself the permission to sit with your thoughts and see where it goes. So just pick a time, set a timer, and walk aimlessly. Pick a safer area than not, but don't have any destination in mind.
Yeah, mental clarity is very tough for a lot of people out there in this day and age, because there's so many distractions. People feel lost because everything feels so loud and in their face. How can someone boost their mental clarity when they're stressed?
Yeah. So a lot of people, if you're referring to, so I'll give you this on the work side. And I just started posting some YouTube videos. So actually one of my videos will reaffirm what I'm saying now if anyone wants to check it out in a deeper level. A lot of times when we feel stressed, especially as professionals, entrepreneurs, business owners, whatever it is, we feel stressed because we feel we're not doing enough. And that comes from the self-comparison. But what happens is, when we feel stressed, is now we rationalize why we shouldn't go, I have all this work to do. Oh, I can't go to the gym today. Or, I can't, squeeze in a healthy cooked meal, so I'm going to DoorDash fast food or something like that. Whatever the rationalizations are. When you're feeling the most stressed, That's when your sympathetic nervous system is just pumping. When your heart rate is beating at just fractions of a beat more per minute, more frequently, and your flight or fight response is continuously being stressed. And that's when we feel that, the rise in our blood pressure and our heart rate elevation and all those other things. And that's going to perpetuate the feeling of stress. And so if you don't do anything to proactively shift that and implement some sort of active exercise or recovery, you're going to stay in that sympathetic nervous system, which is then going to lead to what everyone feels is burnout, when you just feel like you don't have the energy to do anything. And so counterintuitively, when you put active effort and active energy into recovering your body, shifting your body from sympathetic to parasympathetic and your nervous system, and allowing that rest and digest stimulus to kick in, or not stimulus, but the response to kick in, that's when your body's going to start to recover itself. It's going to bring your blood pressure down. It's going to lower your heart rate. And now you're going to start to feel more at ease. And there's plenty of breath exercises that I think complement these really well. Obviously, the most popular one is the Navy SEAL box breathing exercise. About 4 seconds inhale, 4-second pause, 4-second exhale, a 4-second pause, and repeat. And that's one that works really well. There's also the physiological sigh, which is a deep inhale followed up by a small little additional inhale at the peak, and a forceful exhale. And that one works really well as well. So that's just throwing out a few tips that I regularly use for myself. But yeah, just going on a long walk, like a 30-minute to an hour walk, even like in the moment where you feel it's the busiest point of the day, where you just have so much to get done, and you like feel your chest is about to explode because you have so much to do. Counterintuitively, that's the best time to go and take an hour walk and give yourself that permission. And I like to say to all my clients and anyone else I talk to, like, understand, why do you feel like you need to get everything done that you're saying you need to get done? Well, it's usually for the purpose of, satisfying your boss, or, building a bigger business, or all these other things for the purpose of being able to support yourself, your family, and your loved ones. Well, you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And so if you don't take that time to prioritize your health, your clarity, your mental performance, you can't possibly be the version of yourself that can serve those around you. So
Yeah,
I
to
guess
be
I
at the
could have,
top of your mental performance, you have to check yourself. I mean, really unplug and put yourself in situations you don't feel comfortable in, because that's how you grow the most.
Absolutely.
I always say the best quality in the world anyone can develop is the best thing is someone can develop is like the quality of being unstoppable and never giving up.
Yeah.
And taking action, because action is so powerful. That's what I tell anyone. If they want to start a podcast, they want to start a YouTube channel, press record, just start.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I totally agree. Sometimes I say clarity happens in stillness, but at the same time, it also happens through action. And by taking action, you get a lot of clarity. So by having the stillness or solitude, so to better refine that, what I would say is action is great. Usually right before action, you need to have some kind of stillness and solitude to figure out what that first step is. But as soon as you align on that first step, that's where action needs to kick in immediately. And that's where you need to diminish the execution gap. So there's the alignment gap that I mentioned, but I also have what's called the execution gap. And that's the amount of time between thought or decision and action. Once you decide that this is my first step, you need to take that first step, right? Because when you let it drag out, when you procrastinate, right, that's where you start to lose clarity again. So clarity definitely happens through stillness and then action.
That's a great takeaway, Jesse. I was on your Instagram page, and one of the things you said on it is, why do you say discipline starts with skill?
Yeah, so coming back to my YouTube, and YouTube, by the way, has been really helpful for me to put my thoughts in a more structured format. You might be able to tell just by speaking with me, my mind can go in 20 different directions at one time. And so to be able to distill my thoughts into a clear, concise video has been really effective and has helped me as a communicator as well. But the reason why you said discipline starts with skill, is that your question?
Yes.
In my most recent video, I explained what I called my performance freedom engine. And what that engine is a system of how someone can take a skill, whether it's a skill that they have or a skill that they desire to grow or build, and turn that into something that obtains a level of freedom, which is why most people start businesses, entrepreneurs, whatever. And so that engine goes as follows. You take that skill, and by using discipline in the beginning, everyone needs discipline. And we need to implement discipline in the beginning to do the things that we say we're going to do, whether they feel like they're the most convenient thing to do in the moment or not. But as soon as you have the clarity from the skill to know this is what I want to do, now you use discipline to implement that skill. And then over time, by repeatedly implementing that skill, you build confidence, because if the skill is actually a skill and you're good at it, you're going to build more self-confidence to know, like, yeah, I'm good at this thing. I'm going to do it again, to get that feedback. After you've seen that feedback and you've built that confidence, that's when over time you've done the thing so many different times and you continue to want to go back to it. That's where you've built motivation. So it takes skill and then discipline to build the confidence to do the thing enough to then have a motivation intrinsically to do the thing. And that motivation within that process, that's where we've actually used that same system that keeps us locked into our phones and everything else. And we use that same dopamine-driven feedback loop, that same framework, to actually implement a desired habit or desired action in building a certain skill. All right. Once that motivation is set and you've gone from the extrinsic to intrinsic shift of motivation, now you have to focus on that alignment gap that I mentioned earlier, which is understanding, who am I? What is the version of me that's capable of doing X, Y, or Z? Now you act in a dedication of that identity, and you remain dedicated to, I am an active exerciser. I go to the gym every day. You've built the motivation to want to go to the gym every day because you've done it so many times that you're confident that you can go and lift well and feel good doing it. And now you remain dedicated that this is who I am. And over time, that dedication is what builds freedom, because now you've done it long enough, it becomes a part of who you are intrinsically. And now you're free from the cycle of having to worry about a lack of discipline or lack of anything else, because it's built into who you are. And that performance freedom engine is how I've allowed, or how my clients have been able to go from struggling to execute, having a more seamless integration of that thing that they've been struggling to execute on. And that's where the freedom comes. And then once you have that freedom, you have the ultimate clarity to double down on that same skill, find a new skill, and rebuild the same thing. And so that's how skill plays into discipline. But that's just the beginning part of it. And I'll just throw in as well.
Such a good point.
Yeah. I'll just throw in as well, and it's all in my YouTube. But anyone that's listening that might be thinking, I just want to find this thing that I'm passionate about, because then I won't have to feel like I'm working, and then I won't have to worry about being disciplined, because I'll just want to do it anyway. Well, not really how that works. And so if you're even sitting there struggling to figure out a clear path of what that could be, hey, I'm sorry, but saving the turtles might not make you a ton of money. It won't allow you to survive. So you might have to think of, okay, what am I actually really good at? And then you can build a passion through your skill. And so there's a great book by Cal Newport. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he breaks down in a really nice way why skill will outperform passion in doing things that actually matter and things that can actually provide a lifestyle for you, or at least an income at the beginning stages.
Yeah, through discipline, you build the skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Once you align on what that skill is, and you use discipline to double down on it and perform it enough times, you seeing that skill build gives you so much confidence, and that confidence is what then builds the motivation. And once you've locked in that part, it becomes way more sustainable, like I said, because motivation will outperform discipline every day of the week.
Well, I mean, figuring out what you want for the listeners out there, I mean, that is the first step. Figuring out what you want and what you want to be. I mean, and plus, I've been down this road before. Ignore the opinions of others and figure out what you want to do, and do so much volume that it would be unreasonable that you would not be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like to say stacking undeniable proof that you're capable of doing it.
Yes, keep on stacking those small wins on top of each other, and eventually you'll get that big win, but you have to win the small. You got to get the small wins down first.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a compound effect. So again, if you're trying to chase this grand slam big swing, you're going to get a little discouraged when you fail a few times, which is good. Failure is good. But again, the way flow works, especially, and the way any sort of positive performance works, is you need to have clear feedback that what you're doing is working. And so if you set yourself up for failure, it becomes a lot harder. So, it might sound fancy and hard to, just brute force rely on discipline, but it's not sustainable. And, so you talk about comparing to others and listening to others. There's a lot of great value to take from people that you look up to. And first and foremost, I would encourage anyone, if you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, ask yourself, like, would you be willing to trade places with that person? If the answer is no, hey, don't take their advice. It doesn't matter. If the answer is yes, well, then understand the actions that they might have taken on a microscopic level to get to the point that they're at, because you can embody that and you can mirror some things, but you're not them. And what works for them might not work for you. You have a different psychology. You have a different personality style. You have a different set of skills. You have, all these different things. So you have to make sure you're at least comparing apples to apples if you're going to play the comparison game. But even then, like I said, it might sound nice to hear people that you just wish you were like and hear them say discipline over motivation. This is how I got here, is brute force discipline. Like, I'm sorry to say, like, they're lying to you, and that's not what happened. You have to understand what their motivations and goals were to even weigh out if that could possibly be true. But what I'm telling you happened is they found something that they loved, that they were good at, and they did it enough times through discipline at first to know and reinforce to themselves that they were capable and good enough. And through that, they built the confidence and then the motivation to continue doing it, because they are not operating in a way where it feels like it's impossible for them to get up and go to the gym every day or eat a clean meal or whatever work in their business. They're getting up motivated to do that because it's a part of who they are, and they've gone through an identity shift. Now, for the sake of social media, it still sounds fun and hard and all these things to say discipline over motivation, but they're deceiving you, and that's why you're still stuck, is because you're thinking that that's going to solve everything when it's really not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people out there, I love that takeaway, because I do the same thing. I look at other people and I try to mirror what they've done. Like Joe Rogan, for example, for me, for the podcasting. I've recently went back and watched some of his first ever podcasts and seeing how he matured over time. And that's helped me because everyone has a different starting point. And with him or Chris Williams, another podcaster, they all have different starting points. Even with me. I mean, I started this just because I wanted to be, I'm naturally curious, and they kind of started the same way. And it's putting in the reps, putting in the work. Every podcast they've done, they grow from, they learn something from, and it's the small wins stacked on top of each other that makes them who they are. And it's just not, they're not like that because, like, okay, I want to mirror who they are, but I got to realize where they started from to become where they are now, like you're saying, which is very powerful for anyone that wants to become a Joe Rogan or a sports athlete or LeBron James or someone out there. You have to understand the amount of hours they've had to work behind everything they've done to become who they are today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for people out there, I mean, how do you suggest people track their progress?
There's a lot of different ways to do it. Depends on what the task is. For my clients, I have a specific habit tracker that I use, and there's all sorts of tools out there that you can use, whether it's Notion or Google Docs or it doesn't even matter what it is. Honestly, actually, pen and paper or a whiteboard is one of the best ways to do it. Something that's more tactile, that's more physical, that can stay in front of you all day and not get sucked into the dark void of a black screen. I strongly believe that, whiteboards or anything like that are a really good tool because you want it to stay in front of you. You need to see your goals every day, so you're clear of it and it's right in front of you. But yeah, tracking the wins, and this kind of feeds back into the whole dopamine thing of gamifying your progress a little bit and being able to check off a box every day to say, yep, check, I did it. And now 30 days later, you can see, oh, damn, I got 28 out of 30, 30 out of 30. Even if you're perfect with it, that's amazing. But it's better to set a goal at 30 out of 30 and get 80% of the way there versus not setting it at all and being lucky to check off a few boxes. So, but I like to say to put it right in front of you, track it, be intentional with it. If you want to gamify it a little bit, you can also put in, you can kind of bring some lessons of classical conditioning into it as well and motivate yourself with a reward, but inversely also a consequence. I just had a conversation with a client. Actually, I think maybe I posted a clip of the conversation, but for example, one thing that comes to mind, or let me ask you this while we're on a call, like, is there a goal that you're working towards, Matt, that you feel like would be good to set some intention to?
My 100th podcast, which is really cool for me because I've already pre-recorded a lot of my podcasts and I've already passed it, but I haven't published all of them yet. So I've published 90 of them right now, but I do 3 podcasts a week every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And it's one of those things that when I first started, just checking off those boxes was 3 podcasts. Okay, I got those down. Then the next thing was 20 podcasts. Okay, I checked that box off. And then basically it was 100 and I'm coming up on that now. And like I did the math and I was like, okay, so if it would take, how long would it take for me to get to 100, podcasts? And I did the math. If I want to do one a week, it was a long time. It would take me almost a year. And I was like, okay, well, if I really want to do it, I'm going to have to really push forward a lot of content. Okay, so I do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and now it's it's right at the doorstep.
Yeah, cool, man. So you got about 10 more to go. So it doesn't sound like there's any resistance towards having the podcast. You seem pretty clear that you're doing this and you're going to line those guests up and you're going to get it done. Is there anything else that there's been ever any resistance towards completing?
No,
Maybe
I've
it's a
already
personal goal or
pre-recorded all of
anything
them.
like
Like
that?
this one will be
Okay.
released in July 3rd actually. This one will be released. So I mean, we're already stepping forward past 100. Now I have to set another goal of
Okay.
what my next goal would be. It's been a process, and
Yeah.
I've been falling in love. I do it from love, not for love, and it's a process, and it's one of those things that I don't want to be the one scrolling. I want to be the one that's on the scroll. You know what I mean? When you're
Yeah.
scrolling through your
Yeah,
phone.
got it. Yeah,
So
be a
it's
producer,
one of
not
those
a
things
consumer.
that people get lost in technology nowadays, and it's
For
very
sure.
it's very tough for a lot of young generation. The younger generation, they don't understand how much work has to go into something like this podcast, for example. It's not easy. I do not recommend anyone out there to start a podcast. But if you want to go down a personal development journey of nothing else you've ever been through, this is it. I mean, I've interviewed people from all the way around the world, all different walks of life, and it's something that's changed my life for the better. But it's a lot of work, lots of work. And it's a personal development journey. That's all it's all about. It's about the journey, not the destination, but the personal development throughout the journey, which is really powerful for me. And people are seeing what I'm doing, and I'm inspiring a lot of people out there, which is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool, man. Good for you.
I would
Any-
like to, my next
yeah,
goal would
go ahead.
probably be, I have a clothing brand, Every Day is Friday. So if you look me up, Every Day is Friday, Podcast 365 on Shopify or Etsy, you hit the link down below. That's exactly where you find my store, and I'm selling a whole bunch of t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, and I think I'm going to take that next chapter. I want to sell 100 products on the Shopify. I've already sold over 100 on Etsy, but I just want to keep on growing as a brand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, your initial question was how can someone track their progress? For you, you want to be able to distill down, even from selling 100 units of something. What does it actually take to do that? Maybe there's a marketing side of it. Maybe there's a graphic design part of it. Maybe there's like the sourcing and production side of getting quality materials and all that, those kinds of things. Being able to distill all those different paths down, and then even within that, set up some sort of tracking or reward system to keep yourself in it and motivated by it is really powerful. So the one thing that I didn't circle back on, because it was better to use a personal example, I feel. What happens if you sell 100 more hoodies or something?
Just on to the next goal. I've already been down this pathway before. I've sold over 100 products on Etsy, and nothing's changed. You just got to keep moving forward, and it's like to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. You celebrate it for about 5 minutes, but then it's on to the next. It's how it is. I don't know why it is, but you set these goals, 20 podcasts, and you're the only one cheering. You're in an auditorium. You're the one person clapping for yourself for so long, and then eventually, if you put in enough work and enough effort, now I have a following. I have people that are looking up to me. I'm making an influence on a lot of people's lives now. It's really impactful for me personally to change people's lives for the better.
Cool. Yeah, that's really great. And that sounds like a greater purpose that you're serving as well. The tricky, slippery slope, I guess you could say, of on to the next goal is that some people reach a point where they begin to lack fulfillment. And it just feels like they're always looking to the future and never take the time to be present. I know, who was it? I think maybe Buddha or something, whoever it was. Like, depression lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future, peace lives in the present. A lot of times we all feel anxiety is because we're always comparing ourselves to others who are further ahead. And so we're looking ahead of ourselves and thinking, I want to be there. And so we're not in the present to feel peace with where we are at. And we have anxiety. And then people speak that in a way where it becomes a part of their identity. I have anxiety. It's something that I have inside of me. Not experience anxiety. Sometimes it's something that exists external to us that we have control over. But that probably could be a whole other conversation. For you though, let's say the goal is to sell 100 hoodies on your Shopify site instead of like on Etsy or anything else. You want a proper brand. So that means selling 100 hoodies through Instagram or Shopify or whatever it is. What I think is really effective and exciting is to if you've heard of SMART goals, make it specific, make it measurable, make it actionable, make it relevant and timely, all those things. I am going to sell 100 hoodies in X time frame because blank, however that feeds into your overall mission statement. The closer it is to your identity, the better, because that's going to keep you motivated. And again, I'm not afraid to throw out that word. People hear motivation, they start to roll their eyes. And it's so funny when I see it. You start to feel more intrinsically motivated to make sure you're doing the things and making the reps to sell these hoodies, so to speak. I'm just throwing an example. If I sell 100 hoodies within this timeline, then blank, I get this reward. And you would pick the reward. It would be something, I don't like financial rewards. I don't like anything having to do with that. It would be maybe an experience or something like that. I don't know. That would be what I would have a client figure out is what's that, what feels like that, what reward would keep you burning inside to want to achieve. On the flip side of it, sometimes the more powerful thing is to have a consequence. So for a lot of people, I like to use fitness as a great consequence because it's something that's good for you, that's beneficial, but there's much more aversion to it. And so if I were to say, if you don't sell 100 hoodies by September 1st, you have to run a marathon, right? Then what does that look like for you? I mean, you already want to run a marathon, which is great, but like, how much do you really want to run a marathon? Like, are you willing to sell 100 shirts instead to not have to do it? I sure as hell would. So, using that framework and gamifying things a little bit, tracking your progress, setting rewards and consequences, that's just standard classical conditioning to get us to be motivated inherently to do something. Anyway, maybe that was
No,
a bit of a tangent.
motivation is very, very strong because there's been moments that I didn't want to press record. I mean, I didn't want to have a podcast. I didn't want to show up, but it takes true strength to show up every single day.
100%. It absolutely does. And yeah, and you have to put something on the line in order to really perform, right? Because that's the thing with flow and performing at a high level is there needs to be some sort of threat of harm, so to speak, right? There is a fight or flight response, and that's why the sympathetic nervous system exists. It just needs to be regulated in the right way. But yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I would also say, I say the word motivation a lot, but when it comes to classical conditioning, if you were to really understand, if you look at the whole Pavlov experiment and understand it, that's just like the typical school lesson that they will teach you is Pavlov's dogs and being able to use a bell to get them to salivate. If we use that similar framework in the things that we're trying to achieve, motivation is a driving force, but that driving force just integrates whatever that desired action is into our identity, into our biological response, you could call it as our psychological response. Obviously, it's more psychological than biological, but when you've ingrained that into yourself and followed that system long enough, doing the thing doesn't really feel as hard when it just feels like an innate response. You have your cue, your stimulus, and you react and you do it. And you build that up over time, and then that kind of diminishes the need for discipline, quote unquote. But it doesn't make it any less of an important starting point. But yeah, it's really fascinating, honestly, the way you're able to. I have always had the fascination of how people perform at a high level, and you can maybe you could call me a sociopath, I don't know, but from an early age, like understanding, okay, if you build this system and people react like this, like how can you tap into that in this scenario to get the same outcome? And so that's how over time I began to look at sports and business and compare the two and understand, okay, what are some of the rituals or things like that an athlete does that can exist within a business to create those similar psychological cues to engage our brains and our bodies to perform in a certain way based on that. I'm really going on a tangent here, but I guess maybe part of what I'm trying to explain, and I'll give you an example from my life. When I was in college, I was, of course, studying a lot of this stuff as well and working with my basketball team. And I had my own little experiment going on. And so what I did was in every different class, I would chew a different flavor of gum. And so I'm just going off here for a second. But my thought behind it was as many stimuli, I guess I could say, as many stimuli as I can stack that are unique to this class. Now, if I go and take this test and I can recreate that same environment, that same stimulus, and bring that into the test, I'll be able to trigger my brain to recall information according to what information I was learning in the time where I was tasting this flavor or, whatever the case was. I would always try to sit in a consistent area, all those sorts of things. I mean, we naturally do that anyway. And make sure not to sit in the same area of a room across multiple different classes, especially some classes that were like in the same building where all the classrooms kind of look the same. You want to vary that up a bit. So anyway, I'm just getting a little nerdy here, but what I found was by being able to associate a flavor of gum with the subject, I was able to recall more information. And so there are certain things psychologically that a lot of people don't implement that could be exploited, actually, so to speak, to achieve a certain outcome. Now, I don't know how that applies to business. I haven't experimented on that, but I guess that's where my train of thought went.
No, that's really really cool how you can look at stuff like that and really go into the science behind it. That's really impactful.
Yeah, it was a fun little experiment. I mean, my grades were okay. I don't know if it was that effective, but I definitely noticed that I recalling information was always something that I guess I found came natural to me. But I would also say, beyond any of the science hacking or whatever, a big part of it is seeking to understand. And you mentioned you're a curious person, and I find that like the more you seek to really understand something at a deeper level, the more effectively you can recall it and really remember things. But yeah,
No, I
maybe
really
with
want
any
to
other
say thank
questions
you
you got.
because
Yeah,
it's one of those things you got to really know thyself and
yeah,
unpack who
yeah,
you are and be in the moment, like you were saying, and really understand who you are and what you're trying to build and who you're trying to become. Are you trying to build a business for your family? Are you trying to build it for yourself? Are you trying to
yeah,
build a legacy? What are you trying to
for
build
sure.
here? That's where you got to ask yourself.
Yeah, it's all about alignment in your identity and your actions. That's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Now, in these high performance athletes, are you seeing any similarities in that? Like doing things, doing things to take, like for basketball, for example,
Yeah.
people shooting shots in like game speed.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like what makes an athlete great is they expose themselves to the same level of challenge and stimulus and all these other things, competition regularly over time. It doesn't fluctuate. For example, like if you look, I mean, to an extent, day practices compared to college practices are night and day. Like college, you'll notice that in some college practices at the D1 level, which is where I was involved, like you're going hard in practice, like hard, hard. You might go and look at an NBA practice and it looks like they're just messing around. But I mean, these are elite athletes and they know how to go hard. But there are times where they do. It's just at that level, it's funny to explain. But anyway, let's focus on college because I like that comparison better because it's just like it's not the elite of the elite, but it's still elite level. So they're still going hard. But yeah, like you're practicing at game speed, if not even harder, a majority of the time. That way, when you go into a game, the maintenance, like the performance stays the same. You're not trying to exert or overperform or anything like that. And I guess a little nugget for any, high school athletes or anyone like that is they think that the game is really the time to step it up when in reality all the preparation and everything that matters happens in practice. And when you go into a game, it should simply be a continuation of your practice. And that's the same thing applies in business, right? If I don't take the time to, in my own time, reflect on maybe a client call, some things that we went through, where could I have maybe, been on top of understanding or picking up on certain cues from a client that I could have really dove into more and had a transformation. Like if I don't reflect on that, and I don't act as if every single conversation carries equal value or anything like that. Like I need to be preparing for all of those meetings or any resources that I send anyone, like making sure that all is always at a high level. It leaves me less susceptible to like, I guess, fluctuate my delivery between clients. And so even if it's a client, I have one client doing 500,000 a month on TikTok shop as an e-commerce business owner. I have another client making, maybe they're making 10K a month or trying to just get to their first 10K per month. The delivery needs to be the same. So I don't know if that even lands or if that's the same comparison, but like you can compare the one client to the NBA and the other one to a high school client, but like the delivery for me is always the same. I don't fluctuate based on if it's the playoffs or if it's, regular season. And so maybe that's a stretch, but that's what came to mind for me on how that relates to my business.
No, I love how you relate athletes playing sports to business because a lot of
Yeah.
my sports I've played, I've learned a lot from, and I've taken away a lot of things like showing up 15 minutes early to practice. And then guess what? I show the same thing with my business or going to work or doing anything else. I show 15 minutes early or I'm late. That's how I think
Yeah.
about things. And that's how you got to think about things when you're an athlete. I think they have a little bit of an edge if they use what they've learned from their sports and their high performance skills and they transition them to their business or
Yeah.
life in general. I mean, they got to really understand to know thyself the best they can be and grow their skills, like you were saying. I mean, growing their skills is the biggest thing, and the discipline alone will help them grow so much.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, I agree.
And Jesse, this is the part of the show that's the Friday mindset part of the show. I want to dig into your journey, your mindset, and the moments that shaped you. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I've ever received. I'm gonna take a second for this one. It's funny. I ask these questions to a lot of clients, and sometimes I have the answer, but the answer shifts so often. This might not be necessarily advice that I can pinpoint from a specific person, although I will say, if you were to ask me one of my favorite quotes, it would be Steve Jobs' Crazy One speech, and how, the ones that are crazy enough to think that they can change the world, or even on an individual level, think that they can make an impact in whatever it is that you're pursuing. Like, you have to be crazy enough to think that, and you have to have that self-belief, or else you won't. So that's a quote that has always stuck with me early on. I also have the same birthday as Steve Jobs, so that's some sentimental meaning for me. But one of the other biggest things is this wouldn't be a piece of advice that I've necessarily received, but it's more of a phenomenon that I embody and try to remind myself of, which is the spotlight effect. And we all think that everyone else has a microscope on us, and that every little thing that we say or do is being observed and judged. And for someone, I historically struggled with a ton of lack of self-confidence and being reserved and not putting myself out there due to some certain experiences, specifically throughout high school and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the spotlight effect is the phenomenon that I remind myself of, and have a lot of clients that I need to remind of repeatedly, because no one else cares as much about you as you care about you. And that applies to everyone. Naturally, we're all egocentric, so funny enough, we all think that there's a spotlight on us because we think we're important enough for there to be a spotlight on us. When in the scheme of things, everyone else has that belief, and therefore they're not actually looking at anyone else. They're just reflecting on themselves, worried that everyone else is looking at them. And so that's allowed me to put myself out there, especially on social media, and build the repetition of throwing out videos that might not be perfect, and saying certain things that I might believe that not other people believe in or agree with, or anything like that, and putting myself out there. It's basically been some exposure therapy to be able to overcome a lot of those self-doubts. And so I guess my advice to others because of that would be to understand the spotlight effect, and understand that no one else is paying attention to you as much as you think that they are, because they're paying attention to themselves and worrying about other people paying attention to them. And because of that, hopefully that gives someone a little bit of a understanding to be able to take the first step to bring some sort of exposure therapy into their lives with whatever it is that they feel is holding them back. And a lot of the times it's the things that make us the most uncomfortable, that feel like it's hurting us, or feels like it's inflicting some sort of doubt or pain or anything else. Like, those are the things that propel you forward. And some of your deepest, darkest struggles are exactly what can make you great if you overcome them. So I would say focus on those things, whatever it is that comes least naturally to you, whatever the thing that seems the most daunting or seems like it'd be the hardest thing to overcome. All of the success that you are looking for is on the other side of that one thing. That's what I would say.
I love that, the spotlight effect. And if you want it done right, you have to do it yourself.
Yes and no. It depends what you're referring to, because I do believe, like, on a business level, obviously a big part of what I help clients with is building systems to delegate certain things, and understanding that something done, and I could shout out Dan Martell for this phrase, because he says something done 80% as well by somebody else is 100% effing awesome. And so there's a level to which that's true, obviously, from a self-accountability standpoint. If you are the only one that can do it, and it's for your specific benefit, then yes, of course, you need to be the one to do it. There's no one else that's going to do it for you. I will also say, though, that you don't have to do it alone. You can do the work yourself, but you don't have to do it alone. So having someone, whether it's usually I suggest an objective person to lean on and be able to go through things with, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a mentor, a coach, someone that's more objective that can step in and be a sounding board for you and be a support system for you. I think that's super important as well. So you can do it yourself, but you don't have to do it alone.
No, that's a great takeaway. And Jesse, what's one truth about life you wish more people understood?
I'm gonna get too philosophical here, or too dark. Let's see. Ultimately, is no right or wrong. Ethically, morally, maybe, but there really is no right or wrong. I wouldn't call myself a pessimist, maybe more of a realist. But I guess that's to say, like, I know I'm out of time, but this takes me into a completely other train of thought. If I were to speak from my experience, none of us are important enough in the scheme of things to hold ourselves back from achieving great things now. And that might sound completely backwards. And if you were in my mind, you'd understand it. But you're not, so maybe you don't. And what I mean is, if I were to speak to anyone that might be similar to me, we use humility as a way to hold ourselves back and to actually fulfill our egos. To be able to say, Either A, oh, I'm not important enough. It's just this big old world and I'm just this tiny little speck. Well, I believe that's true, but I also let that thought hold me back for too long to say, oh, I'm not important enough. How can I possibly put myself out there and be this egocentric, narcissistic, da da da? And that would be how I would project onto other people. I couldn't be that person. We're all just insignificant. I agree with that in the objective viewpoint, but we also only live this one life. And if you have something that you believe strongly and that you feel like you're good at, you're doing a disservice to others to not put yourself out there and to not be absolutely openly confident about it and put yourself out there. And so I spent the past 20, let's say 5 years of my life, I'm 28 now, letting humility hold me back. But that humility was just my ego in disguise. And I felt that by minimizing myself and holding back anything that maybe any impact that I might have on people or anything else, I told myself I wasn't worthy of being able to be that person because I'm too humble to be that person. I'm too humble to put myself into the spotlight and stand out or anything like that. Now, I don't think that I still don't try to be the center of attention or anything like that. And that's still hard for me, even though maybe there's times where I should be trying to do that. I don't know. But none of you are important enough. And therefore, you should do the things that will make you bold and audacious and set those goals and change your life, change your family's lives, because at the end of the day, everything comes to an end. So why not have it be how you want it to be and not worry about coming off as humble or anything like that? Like that is just your ego holding you back. So if you want to say you don't have an ego, that's actually inversely your ego telling you those things. I don't know if that's a little too out there, but that's something that... Yeah.
You only get so many summers in a lifetime, and you have to take a risk to become who you want to become.
For sure.
And a lot of people need to hear that because life is so short. Life is so short, and you really have to take responsibility for the life that you live and the actions you take. Build that discipline, build that mindset, really have a routine at the end of the day. Yep. Jesse, what has been the biggest driving factor for success in your career?
Well, it's funny because I don't feel like I've actually reached the success yet, so to speak. I'm definitely grateful where I'm at and be able to have the life that I live and all those things. But I guess that feeds into how a lot of the issues that some of my other clients face is we're always just chasing more and more. I definitely have a baseline that I'm still trying to hit. But the biggest factor, this is probably super cliche, is clarity. The reason why is because in times where I feel like I'm not successful, quote unquote, all that is me not being clear or in alignment with what I believe success actually means. And when I lose sight of that, and when I start to only think of it as far as revenue and income and all this kind of thing, or material stuff or anything like that, that's when I have that internal dialogue of, oh, I'm not successful yet. I'm not where I want to be. But then I look around and I'm like, okay, well, I can go and be wherever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want. And I can spend my time doing the things that mean most to me. I can fly up and go to my family and be remote anywhere I need to be and continue. Like, I've built a life where I can do that. Is that success? Is that more meaningful to be able to have autonomy over my time and location and spend the time with the people I care about most? Like, well, in that regard, sure, then maybe I'm way further ahead than most. And just, I guess, having that gratitude and reflecting on that is what helps me a lot. But also having a purpose outside of myself to know that I'm working towards, whether it's being able to support my parents or my grandparents or my siblings and my girlfriend or anything like that. That keeps me pretty driven as well, to know that I can have an impact and serve others. I've always just kind of been wired that way. I've always gotten more enjoyment out of giving than anything else. So that's what keeps me going.
No, yeah, having impact and having a clarity on your future and what you're doing right now, it's so powerful. So powerful. And Jesse, the show is called Every Day is Friday, and Friday has a special energy, whether it's freedom, excitement, or just feeling of accomplishment after a long week. I want to hear from you, Jesse. What does Friday mean to you?
It's funny because I start every Monday, I check in with my clients and I say, happy Monday. Like, it's so great it's Monday. And the reason why is because I believe in building a life where you don't look forward to the weekends. The weekends are a continuation of doing what you love to do every single day. Maybe it means you have a little bit more free time because all the other people in your life that are otherwise occupied during the week are now free. And so that's exciting because it's the weekends. But Friday to me, so I guess for that purpose, that's what Friday means to me, is like that's the time where I can now go and connect with others after a week where everyone else is tied up doing other stuff. But also looking forward to, and this is something that I'm going to carry more into my weekends now after the walk especially, is seeking more solitude. Now that, the busy work week isn't happening, and it allows for a bit of a disconnect as well, and a time for reflection. So, I mean, that's what comes top of mind for me. Is I'm looking forward to some Saturdays where I'm going to disconnect from my phone, my screens, anything else. Maybe I'll limit it to just making content, but not consuming. I'm going to be usually I record a lot of my YouTube videos on Saturdays or Fridays between those two. So that's what that means to me. But yeah, it's funny because I like to encourage like Happy Monday and that whole vibe. So it's kind of the inverse, but it's similar as far as like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's similar in some ways, maybe it's not, but
Yeah, no, every day is Friday is about bringing that energy into everyday life, like you're saying. Like the Happy Monday is like Happy Friday, bring that energy into every day. And Jesse, this is a chance to leave the listeners with something powerful. Is there anything else you want to share?
Something powerful. Wow. Hopefully something that I said throughout this spoke to anyone, and that in itself is enough for me. I guess I would just say, if you're someone that feels like you are meant for more, that you have a greater ambition, and that you feel like your current identity and actions aren't quite aligning with what will actually bring those goals or get you to that end point, or whatever it is you're trying to pursue, you don't have to do it alone. There are people that can help you. I'm always a resource to anyone, and I respond to all DMs, everything. My Instagram is just my full name, Jesse H. Hoffman. Same on YouTube. Obviously appreciate any support there, and hopefully my content can resonate. And I'm always looking for feedback on what's most valuable to others so I can give my insights on that. But it's just to say, embody the identity of the version of the person that's capable of achieving the things that you want to achieve. And all that is a choice today. And I guess I'll leave this philosophical take, which is we all get stuck in the idea of being someone in the future, being the person that is making $100,000 a year, or whatever your goal is, $1 million a year. But you can't be someone in the future. To be indicates a present tense. And so you need to choose to be that person now. Otherwise, you're always stuck in that process of becoming. And becoming is an ongoing process that never ends. I'm always becoming a better person, a better brother, a better boyfriend, a better son, a better business owner, all these things. I'm always in the process of becoming. But you need to be before you can actually become. And you will only ever be today. You can't be tomorrow. You can't be the next day. So choose to be the person that's capable of achieving the things that you're looking to achieve now, because now is the only time you can do it. So take the actions that person would take today. If we had more time, I'd dive more into the actual etymology of that. But yeah.
No, it's like become 1% better every single day. You'll be 365% better in a year's time. And Jesse, I really appreciate you sharing all your stories and experiences, and all your information will be in the description down below. Everyone go check out his page on Instagram and everywhere else. And this is a wrap for this episode today. And I know the listeners got a lot of value out of this, and it's been an awesome conversation, Jesse. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Matt. I appreciate the conversation, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Yeah, and then to everyone listening, stay tuned for more amazing stories on Every Day is Friday Podcast 365. If you enjoyed this, make sure to follow, share, and keep that Every Day is Friday mindset going. Until next time, stay inspired and make the Every Day is Friday feeling every single day. Until next time, everybody.